the wish that surprised everyone. The evening air was quiet in a small Los Angeles cafe where Keanu Reeves sat alone at a corner table. His hands rested around a warm cup of tea, yet his eyes seemed far away, lost in thought. The people around him spoke softly, unaware of the weight he carried in his heart. To many, Keanu was a man of mystery, known for his kindness and humility. But tonight he carried something he had kept inside for many years. He whispered to himself, almost like a secret. "I wish I could work with Sandra again." His words were soft, but they carried deep meaning. It was not about fame or money. It was about connection, trust, and respect. Sandra Bullock had been a part of one of the most important chapters of his life, both on screen and off. The memory of their time together still lived inside him like a flame that never went out. As he sat there, his mind wandered back to the days when they first met. They were both young, uncertain of what the future would bring. Their film had taken the world by surprise, but more than the success, it was the bond they created that stayed with him. He remembered Sandra's laughter, her fearless honesty, and the way she carried strength even in moments of doubt. But time had moved quickly. Life had changed for both of them. They had taken different paths, faced different struggles, and carried silent battles no one else could see. For years, Keanu had hidden his wish, believing that some things were better left as memories. Yet the truth was, his heart longed for one more chance. Not to relive the past, but to create something new, something filled with meaning, kindness, and hope. Suddenly, the cafe door opened and a few people recognized him. Some whispered, some pointed, but Keanu remained calm as he always did. One young fan approached him shyly and said, "You always look so peaceful, sir. How do you stay that way?" Keanu smiled gently. "I try to remember what really matters. People, moments, kindness, that is all." The fan nodded, moved by his words, not knowing the silent wish he carried inside him that night. Keanu's phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from an old friend in Hollywood. The text was simple. "There's talk about a new project. They're looking for something big, something meaningful. Are you interested?" Keanu's heart skipped. For a moment, he imagined Sandra's face, her presence, and the energy they once shared. But then doubt crept in. What if she did not feel the same? What if the timing was wrong? What if the world had already moved on? He closed his eyes and took a slow breath. Life had taught him patience, but it had also taught him that chances come rarely, and sometimes you must speak your truth before it is too late. That night, as he walked out of the cafe under the quiet glow of the city lights, he made a decision. He would not let fear hold him back anymore. He would express his wish openly, not as a demand, but as a simple truth from his heart. He would let the world know how much respect and admiration he carried for Sandra Bullock, and how deeply he wished to stand beside her once more, not just as an actor, but as a friend who believed in her strength. What he did not know was that this decision would set off a chain of events he could never have expected. It would bring joy, but also conflict. It would test his patience, reveal hidden truths, and touch millions of lives. The wish of one humble man was about to become the beginning of a story that no one saw coming. And so, his journey began, with a quiet whisper in a cafe and a decision made under the city lights. When the wish reached her, the morning sun rose gently over the city as Keanu Reeves sat by his window, holding his phone in his hand. His decision from the night before still echoed in his heart. He knew it was time to speak, but even a man known for courage could feel the weight of hesitation. Yet something in his soul told him this moment mattered. He typed slowly, his fingers careful with every word. "I have always admired Sandra, not just as an actress, but as a human being. If life ever gives me another chance, I would love to work with her again." He read the line again. It was simple, honest, and filled with respect. He pressed send. Within minutes, the words spread, carried by the media, shared by fans, whispered across headlines. But for Keanu, it was not about attention. It was about truth. He had finally said out loud what his heart had carried silently for years. Miles away in her own home, Sandra Bullock was sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee. The morning news played softly in the background. She was not expecting anything unusual. Her days were quieter now, filled with family, reflection, and moments of healing after many storms in her personal life. But then her phone buzzed with messages from friends. "Have you seen this?" One text read. "He mentioned you," another said. Curious, Sandra opened the article. The words appeared before her eyes, and for a long moment, she froze. She read them twice, 3 times, as her heart began to beat faster. Keanu's wish was now in front of her. Her mind filled with memories. The laughter on set, the long conversations between takes, the silent understanding they once shared. She placed her coffee down, her hands trembling slightly. She had never spoken about it publicly, but she too had carried a quiet longing. She missed the way they worked together, how natural it felt, how safe it was to be herself around him. Life had taken her down different paths, some joyful, some painful, and through it all, she had wondered if that connection was something she would ever feel again. Her son ran into the kitchen, laughing about something he saw on TV, and Sandra smiled at him with warmth. In that moment, she realized the truth. She was no longer the same woman she had been years ago. But the bond she shared with Keanu was something pure, untouched by time. The day went on, and news outlets kept repeating the story. Fans flooded social media with excitement, begging for a reunion, calling it a dream come true. "Bring them back together," one fan wrote. "We need their magic again." But beneath the excitement, there were shadows of doubt. Some industry voices whispered, "Maybe it's just nostalgia. Maybe it won't work again. Maybe the past should stay in the past." These words reached Sandra, too, and for a brief moment, she questioned if she had the strength to return, to open that part of her life again. Later that evening, Sandra sat quietly on her balcony, watching the sun sink into the horizon. The air was calm, yet her heart was restless. She whispered softly, as if speaking to herself, "Why now, Keanu? Why after all these years?" But even as she asked, she felt something deeper, a spark of hope she thought had been lost. The next day, Sandra's close friend called her. "This is your moment," the friend said gently. "Maybe life is giving you both another chance, not just for the screen, but for yourselves." Sandra did not answer right away. Her eyes grew wet, her chest heavy with emotions she had locked away. She knew the world was watching, but she also knew this was not about the world. It was about 2 souls who had once met and found something rare. With a deep breath, she picked up her phone. She began typing a reply. Her fingers trembled, not because of fear, but because she understood the weight of what she was about to say. Her message was short, but it carried everything she wanted him to know. "I would love that too." She sent it. The moment was small, but the meaning was endless. 2 simple replies had now crossed paths, and together they opened a door neither of them thought they would walk through again. What neither of them knew was that this door would not only change their lives, but would inspire millions of others who believed that respect, kindness, and trust could bring people together no matter how much time had passed. When silence turned into a meeting, the world buzzed with excitement after the exchange of messages, but Keanu and Sandra did not rush into the noise. For them, this was not about the headlines or the endless conversations happening online. It was about something deeper, something fragile. They both needed time to think, to breathe, to decide what step should come next. Keanu, as always, kept a calm face when asked by reporters. He gave a gentle smile and said, "Life is about moments. Sometimes, you just hope those moments return." It was his way of keeping the truth safe without letting the world see how much this meant to him. Sandra, on the other hand, stayed quiet. She did not give interviews. She did not answer the questions shouted at her by photographers. She focused on her family, her children, her quiet life. But inside her heart, a storm was rising. The thought of seeing Keanu again filled her with warmth, but also fear. What if things had changed too much? What if the bond they once shared had faded with time? One evening, as Keanu walked through the quiet streets near his home, his phone rang. The screen lit up with a name he had not seen in years, Sandra. His breath caught. For a moment, he hesitated, his thumb hovering over the answer button. Then, with a calm exhale, he pressed it. "Hello?" he said softly. "Hi, Keanu." Sandra's voice came through, gentle yet uncertain. There was silence for a few seconds, a silence heavy with unspoken memories. "It's been a while," he said. "Yes," she replied, and then her voice softened. "But it doesn't feel like it." They both laughed quietly. The sound awkward at first, then warmer as the minutes passed. They talked about small things, life, family, little struggles, and little joys. But underneath, both of them knew this call was not about small things. It was about opening the door to something larger, something they were both afraid to name. At last, Sandra whispered, "Maybe we should meet, just us. No cameras, no noise." Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, the corners of his lips lifting into a small, genuine smile. "I'd like that," he said. The following week, they chose a quiet place away from the city, a small park with a bench hidden beneath tall trees. It was late afternoon when Sandra arrived first, wearing simple clothes, her hair tied back, no makeup, no spotlight. She sat down, her hands fidgeting as her heart raced. Minutes later, Keanu appeared. He walked with the same calm presence, yet his eyes carried an emotion he rarely allowed anyone to see. As he approached, Sandra stood. For a moment, they just looked at each other, searching for traces of the people they once were. And then, without planning, they stepped forward and embraced. The hug was quiet, without words, but it spoke of years lost, of respect never broken, and of a bond that had waited patiently for this very moment. When they finally pulled apart, both had tears in their eyes, though neither tried to hide them. "You look the same," Sandra said, smiling through her tears. "And you look stronger," Keanu replied, his voice steady but filled with warmth. They sat on the bench, the world around them silent except for the rustling of leaves. They talked about the years apart, the struggles they had faced, the loneliness, the moments of doubt. Sandra shared the pain of loss and the challenges of raising her children, while Keanu spoke about his journey of carrying grief and still choosing kindness every day. The more they talked, the more they realized something powerful. Their connection had not faded. It had grown quietly, like roots beneath the earth, waiting for the right season to bloom again. Yet even in this tender reunion, conflict lingered. Sandra hesitated when the subject of a new project came up. "Keanu, I don't know if I can step back into that world," she admitted. "It takes so much, and I've built a life away from it." Keanu nodded slowly. "I understand, but this isn't about the world. It's about us. It's about telling a story that matters together." She looked at him, her heart torn between fear and hope. And in that moment, she realized that this meeting was not just about a project. It was about healing, about reclaiming a part of herself she thought she had lost. The sun began to set, casting golden light across the park. As they stood to leave, Sandra whispered, "Let's see where this goes, one step at a time." Keanu smiled, his eyes shining with quiet relief. "One step at a time," he repeated. What neither of them knew was that their simple meeting in a quiet park would soon become the center of a storm, one that would test their strength, challenge their friendship, and reveal truths that had been hidden for years. When the world began to question, their meeting at the park had been private, but in Hollywood nothing stayed hidden for long. Someone had seen them together, and within days pictures began to spread across news outlets and social media. Two figures sitting on a bench, their faces calm yet filled with emotion. People quickly guessed the truth. Keanu and Sandra were back in touch. At first, fans celebrated. "This is the reunion we've been waiting for," one comment read. Their kindness and chemistry belonged together. Hashtags trended, messages of hope poured in, and excitement reached every corner of the internet. But not everyone was supportive. In boardrooms and studios, voices of doubt began to rise. "Is this a good idea?" one producer asked during a meeting. "They are from another time. The industry has changed. People want new faces, not old memories," another voice added. "And what if the project fails? It could ruin the respect they've built." These whispers reached both Keanu and Sandra, and they cut deep. Keanu, known for his calm strength, tried to brush them aside, but he felt the weight pressing on his shoulders. He had wanted this for so long, but he never wanted it to harm Sandra or bring her into unwanted chaos. Sandra felt even more conflicted. She had built her life outside the spotlight, protecting her family from the constant noise of fame. Now the noise was returning, louder than ever. One evening, after putting her children to bed, she sat alone in the living room with her phone in her hand. Messages from friends and colleagues filled the screen, some encouraging, some warning her to be careful. Her heart was heavy. She remembered her words to Keanu, one step at a time. But now even the first step felt impossible. Meanwhile, Keanu sat in his home surrounded by silence. He thought about Sandra's smile at the park, the tears in her eyes, the strength in her voice when she spoke about her life. He could not let doubt break what they had just begun to rebuild. With quiet determination, he decided to reach out. He called her the next morning. "Sandra," he said softly, "I know this is heavy. I know people will doubt us. But I believe in you, in us, and what we can do together. We don't have to prove anything to anyone. We just need to be honest with ourselves." His words lingered in her mind long after the call ended. She walked into her garden, the air fresh with the scent of flowers. She closed her eyes and thought about her journey, the pain, the healing, the strength she had gained. Maybe this was not about Hollywood at all. Maybe this was about reminding the world and themselves that kindness and respect still mattered. Days later, they agreed to meet again. This time, it was in a quiet studio office, away from the cameras. Scripts and ideas were placed on the table in front of them, but instead of reading the words, they looked at each other. "Do you want this?" Keanu asked gently. Sandra hesitated, her eyes searching his face. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Not of working with you, but of everything that comes with it." "The noise, the judgment, the expectations?" Keanu nodded. "I'm scared too, but sometimes fear means the path is important." She let out a deep breath and finally smiled. "Then maybe we should try." It was a fragile yes, but it was enough. They agreed to move forward, slowly, carefully, with respect for each other's boundaries. They did not announce it to the world yet. They chose to keep it between them, a quiet secret blooming beneath the noise. But even as they made this choice, forces outside were already moving. Studios wanted to control the narrative, some trying to push them into rushed deals, others warning them to stay away. Old rivals whispered against them, trying to stir doubt. The path ahead would not be simple. Their reunion was not just about a project anymore. It was becoming a battle between the purity of their bond and the harsh reality of an industry that often forgot the value of kindness. As Keanu and Sandra walked out of the studio together that evening, the city lights flickered like silent witnesses. Their steps were steady, side by side, but both knew storms were waiting beyond the horizon. When old wounds returned, the decision to move forward should have brought relief, but instead, it opened doors to old memories that both Keanu and Sandra had tried to bury. The quiet yes they had shared in the studio was fragile, and behind it waited wounds that time had not fully healed. For Keanu, it was the memory of loss. He carried grief like a shadow, never loud, never demanding, but always present. Every time he thought about working again with Sandra, he also thought about the moments in his life where happiness slipped away without warning. Fear whispered in his ear, "What if this too disappears?" Sandra carried her own battles. She had endured heartbreak, the weight of personal struggles, and the endless pressure of being in the public eye. When she had stepped away from the spotlight, it was not just a choice. It was survival. Now, as she considered stepping back into it with Keanu, old fears rose inside her. Can I handle it again? Will I lose myself? Their bond was strong, but their scars were real. One evening, they met at Sandra's home. The children were asleep, and the house was filled with quiet warmth. Keanu sat across from her at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cup of tea. Sandra looked tired but calm. "Keanu," she said softly, "I need to be honest. I want this. I really do. But I'm afraid. Not of us, but of me. I don't know if I can face the weight again." He looked at her with steady eyes. "You don't have to carry it alone. I'll be there step by step. And if it becomes too much, we stop. No project, no story is more important than your peace." His words touched her deeply. She lowered her eyes, tears forming. "You always say the right thing," she whispered. but sometimes I wonder if the world will let us just be ourselves. The next day, their fears began to grow stronger. An article appeared in a major magazine. It was filled with speculation, rumors, and half-truths. It claimed their reunion was a publicity stunt, that they were using nostalgia to remain relevant, that their bond was only an illusion. The words were cruel, and while Keanu ignored them, Sandra felt the sting. She closed her laptop and sat in silence, her heart heavy. The very thing she feared was now happening. Her life, her truth turned into headlines. Keanu came to see her that evening. When she opened the door, her eyes were red. "They will never understand," she said bitterly. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We don't need them to understand. We just need to understand each other." But doubt had already taken root. As they sat together on the sofa, Sandra finally spoke the words she had been holding inside. "Keanu, what if we are making a mistake? What if the magic we had is gone, and all we are doing is chasing something that belongs to the past?" The question hit him hard. He had always believed their bond was timeless, but now he had to face the truth. Time changes people. Perhaps they were not the same, and perhaps the story they wanted to create together would not shine the way it once did. Yet even in that moment of fear, Keanu chose honesty. "Maybe we have changed," he admitted. "But that doesn't mean the bond is gone. It means we can create something new, something honest. Not the past, but the present." Sandra wiped her tears, her eyes searching his face. She wanted to believe him, but the scars inside her still ached. The night ended quietly with no clear answers. They sat together in silence, both lost in thought, both wondering if their dream was strong enough to survive the storms rising around them. Outside the window, the city lights glimmered, unaware of the fragile battle being fought inside that small home. When the turning point arrived, the silence between them grew heavier after that night. Keanu and Sandra still spoke, still met, but something unspoken lingered in the air. The old wounds were there, and both feared pressing too hard might break what little progress they had made. But life has a way of forcing answers when hearts remain undecided. One afternoon, Sandra was invited to a charity event for children in need. She hesitated at first, but finally agreed. She wanted her children to see her giving back, to remind herself that kindness was still stronger than fear. When she arrived, to her surprise, Keanu was already there. He was standing quietly near the back of the hall, helping volunteers stack boxes of books and toys, unnoticed by the cameras. Their eyes met across the room, and in that moment, Sandra felt the years between them dissolve. She walked over slowly, her heart beating faster. "You didn't tell me you'd be here," she said softly. Keanu smiled faintly, wiping dust from his hands. "I didn't plan to. I just wanted to help." Together, they spent the afternoon giving out gifts, speaking with children, and listening to their stories. Sandra watched Keanu kneel down to talk to a little boy who had lost his father, his voice gentle and steady. She saw the kindness in his eyes, the same kindness that had drawn her to him years ago. Later that evening, as the event ended, Sandra sat on a bench outside the hall, her heart heavy with emotion. Keanu joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. He handed one to her without a word. For a long while, they sat in silence, watching the lights of the city flicker in the distance. Finally, Sandra spoke. "Seeing you with those children today, it reminded me why I trusted you from the beginning. You've never changed, Keanu. You still live with kindness, even when no one is watching." His eyes softened. "And you still carry strength even when you think you're weak." She turned to look at him, her voice trembling. "I've been afraid of losing myself again, afraid of being judged. But today I realized something. This isn't about Hollywood. It isn't about proving anything. It's about telling a story with meaning. And if I'm going to do it with anyone, it has to be with you." Her words felt like a door unlocking. Keanu nodded slowly, his expression calm but his heart quietly racing. "Then let's do it," he said. "Not for them, not for the noise, but for us, for the truth we want to share." For the first time since their reunion, Sandra felt peace. The doubt was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She realized that their bond was not about recreating the past. It was about building something new, born from who they had become. The next week, they sat with a small team of trusted friends and began planning their project. It was not about explosions or spectacle. It was about humanity, resilience, and kindness, themes that had shaped both their lives. Yet as their plans grew, so did the whispers against them. Some powerful voices in the industry tried to block their way, arguing that the project was too risky. But now Keanu and Sandra stood differently. They were no longer shaken by doubt. They stood side by side, their voices calm but firm. And then, one unexpected moment changed everything. During a quiet press appearance for another cause, a journalist asked Sandra directly, "What do you think about Keanu's wish to work with you again?" The room fell silent. Sandra paused, the cameras flashing, the world holding its breath. Then, with quiet strength, she smiled and said, "I think the world still needs stories about kindness, and there's no one I'd rather tell them with than him." The response shook the room. Fans cheered, headlines exploded, and for the first time, the noise around them was not filled with doubt but with hope. But beyond the cheers, there was something even more powerful, the quiet understanding between Keanu and Sandra. They had crossed the turning point. There was no going back now. When the bond proved unbreakable, the world had heard Sandra's words, and the response was louder than anyone expected. Fans celebrated with joy, sharing old clips of her and Keanu, remembering the warmth they had once brought to the screen. "This is what we need again," people wrote. Hope, kindness, honesty. But with the cheers came new challenges. Studios rushed in with contracts, some filled with pressure, others with hidden traps. Powerful voices whispered, "This will never work," hoping to tear them apart before they could even begin. Every step forward was met with resistance, and it tested their patience. Keanu remained steady as he always did. He refused to let greed or pressure decide their path. "We don't need the biggest budget," he told Sandra one evening as they sat together in his home. "We just need a story that feels true," Sandra agreed. "If we make this, I want it to mean something. Not just for us, but for everyone who believes kindness still matters." Together, they chose a small team they trusted, people who believed in their vision. Slowly, they began shaping their project. It was not about spectacle, not about fame. It was about resilience, respect, and the power of connection. Yet the journey was not smooth. There were days of exhaustion, days when doubts tried to return. Sandra struggled with the weight of attention, sometimes hiding away to protect her peace. Keanu faced criticism from those who accused him of living in the past. But every time the doubts grew, they found strength in each other. One night, as they stood on a quiet rooftop overlooking the city, Sandra turned to Keanu with tears in her eyes. "Why do you never give up?" she asked softly. He looked at her with gentle eyes. "Because giving up means losing the chance to make something good. And I can't lose that. Not with you." His words broke through her fear. She smiled through her tears, realizing that their bond was not built on pressure or expectation. It was built on trust. When the day finally came to announce their project, they stood side by side on a small stage. The lights were bright, the cameras endless, but their voices were calm. Sandra spoke first. "We are not here to relive the past. We are here to tell a story about hope, about resilience, and about kindness, the very things that carried us through our own struggles." Keanu added, "This is not just our project. This is a message to everyone that no matter how much time passes, respect and compassion can bring people back together." The room filled with applause, not the empty kind of applause that comes with fame, but the genuine kind that comes when people feel something real. Months later, when the project was finally complete, audiences across the world watched in silence. Their hearts moved. Some cried, some smiled, but all felt the same truth. This was not just a story on a screen. This was two souls, scarred yet strong, choosing kindness over fear. And as the credits rolled, the world seemed to pause, reminded that respect, humility, and resilience were not old values, they were timeless. Keanu and Sandra stood together, not as actors chasing fame, but as human beings who had faced storms and still chosen hope. Their journey had not been easy, but it had been honest. And in the end, that honesty was what gave it power. That night, as they walked out of the theater, Sandra looked at Keanu with a quiet smile. "We did it," she whispered. He nodded, his eyes soft. "No, Sandra, we lived it." The stars above glimmered silently as if blessing the moment. And for the first time in many years, both of them felt a peace that no doubt, no headline, and no fear could ever take away.